The year is 1114 BCE. In the heart of Rome, the streets still hum with life. Vendors argue over prices. Children run between stalls. Senators are carried past in litters, faces half hidden in the shade. The city looks solid, eternal, safe. But inside one building near the Forum, the air feels different. Heavy, watchful. It is the house of the Vestals. In one of its inner rooms, a young woman sits alone. Her white veil lies folded beside her. Her hair is loose over her shoulders. On the floor, a small oil lamp burns with a weak flame. She is not asleep. She will not sleep tonight. Her name is not important to the men who will judge her. To them, she is a role, a symbol, a problem to solve. To Rome, she is something more. She is a Vestal Virgin, one of the women sworn to guard the sacred fire that keeps the city in the gods' favor. Tonight, she waits to learn if Rome still believes she is pure. Outside, in another part of the complex, older men talk in low voices. They wear white robes with purple borders. They speak of omens and laws. They speak of Rome's safety. They do not speak of her fear. By dawn, the city will know that a Vestal stands accused of breaking her vow of chastity. By dusk, the city may watch her taken away. Rome will say it is necessary. Rome will say the gods demand it. Rome will not admit how much of this is about power and how little is about proof. Most of us hear the words Vestal Virgin and think of calm priestesses in white, marble statues with smooth faces and perfect veils, silent guardians of a holy fire. They look peaceful, untouchable, safe. That picture is not wrong. It is only half the story. The Vestals did have privilege. They moved through the city with a level of protection few Roman women ever knew. They could own land. They could make a will. They had front-row seats at games. Their word carried weight in court. If a man on his way to execution saw a Vestal by chance, the state might spare his life. She was a kind of living shield. But that honor came with a price. A Vestal was not just a person. She was an idea wrapped in a body. Her purity was not her own. It belonged to Rome. If the city lost a battle, if crops failed, if omens looked bad, people searched for someone to blame, someone who could stand for the whole city's sin. A woman whose body symbolized Rome itself made a very convenient target. To understand how dark her position could become, you have to start at the beginning, not at the moment of trial, at the moment of choice. A girl became a Vestal when she was between 6 and 10 years old. Small, young, still more child than woman. She had to be freeborn. Her parents had to be married in a way Rome recognized as proper. She could not have visible defects. She could not have been a slave. Rome wanted its priestesses to reflect the image it had of itself. Whole, legitimate, unsullied. When a new Vestal was needed, the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, chose her from a group of candidates. Sometimes the decision involved a sort of lottery. Sometimes it involved more direct pressure. Imagine what it meant for a family to hear that the chief priest wished to take their daughter into the service of the state. You could refuse, but refusal was dangerous. It suggested you did not value the god's honor. So the girl walked from her family's house to the Atrium Vestae. She crossed the line that was more than stone. That line divided one life from another. Behind her she left the chance of marriage, children, ordinary gossip, ordinary mistakes. Ahead of her was a 30-year vow. The day she entered, Rome welcomed her with ceremony. The pontifex took her hand and led her from her father's control into the control of the state. Some sources say a little of her hair was cut and buried, a symbol that the old life was gone. Her clothes changed. Her name might change too. Rome did not just give her a task. It claimed her body and her time. The first 10 years she spent learning. She learned the rituals. She learned the songs and prayers that most Romans never heard. She learned how to look at the flame and see more than light and heat. She learned the rules of the house, where she could go, when she could speak, when she had to be silent. The next 10 years she spent performing the duties of the order. She rose before dawn. She checked the flame. She took part in sacrifices and rites. She walked in public on set days, her veil arranged just so, her gaze controlled. People stared at her as if she were a moving omen. The final 10, she trained the younger ones. She became the person who told them, "Do not stand there. Do not laugh too loud. Do not be seen in that corner of the forum with that man. Do not let the fire go out." After that, in theory, she could leave and marry. In practice, many did not. Some by choice. Some because no man wanted to live with a woman who had carried that much sacred weight. A former Vestal could be both honored and feared. To marry her was a kind of risk. We often hear about their duties in simple terms. They guarded the sacred fire in the temple of Vesta. They took part in rituals. They prepared sacred materials. But that fire was not just a flame in a bowl. To Romans, it was the life of the city. If it went out, it meant the relationship between Rome and its gods was broken. Imagine the pressure that puts on the women who watch it. There are stories of what happened when the flame failed. One tale says that when the fire went out under a Vestal named Aemilia, she saved it by calling on the goddess and carrying living fire in her robe. The story turns a failure into a miracle. But not all stories end that way. In other cases, when the flame died, a Vestal was beaten. The Pontifex, the man who led the entire Roman religion, would take her to a dark place and strike her with rods. Not to kill, but to remind her that Rome did not forgive carelessness in its symbols. Even when the body was not buried, it was not fully safe. Now add one more layer. The Vestals had to remain chaste during their service. No sex, no marriage, no hint of an intimate relationship. The body that tended the fire had to be, in Roman eyes, untouched. This is where the horror begins to grow. In any society, the idea of purity is slippery. Who defines it? Who checks it? Who decides when it has been broken? For the Vestals, this was not an abstract question. It carried the weight of life and death. In theory, if a Vestal broke her vow of chastity, she threatened Rome's safety. Her act might anger the gods. It might explain why an army had lost or why the Tiber had flooded. She became a convenient cause for every kind of bad luck. But how do you prove a crime that happens in private, with no witnesses, in a culture where men run the courts and the priesthood? Often you do not. You simply decide. Rumors were enough to start the process. A look held too long with a man. A visit at a strange hour. A rival family eager to damage a Vestal's relatives. A Rome that needed to show the gods it was serious about moral order. The Pontifex Maximus might hear a report. He might then question the Vestal in private. He might talk to others. We do not have transcripts. We have only brief lines in ancient texts. They say things like, she was found guilty of unchastity, or she was accused and punished. That gap in detail is important. It is where doubt lives. It is where power moves. For the Vestal, the process probably began with a change in how people looked at her. Colder eyes, longer silences. Other Vestals stepping back a little, officials watching her movements more closely. The sense that the walls around her were closing in. She would know the stories. Everyone in Rome did. Past Vestals who had been accused during times of war or famine. Some condemned, some acquitted. The punishment was famous. So was the fact that the law did not allow a Vestal to be executed in ordinary ways. Roman law said that a Vestal could not be whipped to death or crucified, or thrown from a cliff in full view of the public. Her body was too sacred to be killed openly, but the state still wanted a way to remove her if it decided she was guilty. So it found a legal fiction. It could not shed her blood. It could not hang her. So it buried her alive, not as a barbaric act, they would say, but as a kind of offering to the gods. They told themselves they were not killing her. They were simply sealing her in a chamber under the earth, with some bread, a lamp, and a small amount of water. If she died, that was the will of the gods. This is how a state lies to itself. Before that final step, there was what we might call the trial, but it did not look like a modern trial. There was no jury in the sense we know. There was no defense lawyer. There were priests, senators, and sometimes the people of Rome watching. The Pontifex Maximus took the lead. He would question the Vestal. He might question the man accused with her, if there was one. He might ask whether she had broken her vow. Her answer mattered. But the outcome often depended less on evidence and more on the mood of the city, the strength of her supporters, the political moment. When Rome was healthy and confident, it could be forgiving. When Rome was shaken, it looked for sin. During crises, the gods were said to be angry. Someone had to calm them. Some famous cases show the pattern. In one, 3 Vestals were accused together. 2 were found guilty and sentenced. 1 was spared. Ancient writers say that the man accused with them was beaten to death. They also note that the decision about 1 Vestal changed after further debate. It suggests that even then, some people felt uneasy. In another case under the Emperor Domitian, a chief Vestal named Cornelia was charged. Domitian liked to present himself as a moral reformer. He liked to say he defended old values. When bad signs appeared, he pointed to others and said they had angered the gods. Cornelia became one of those targets. Ancient sources claim that she protested her innocence even as she was led to the chamber. They say she tripped, and when the executioners tried to help her, she drew back and said she must reach the place of death pure and clean, with no man's hand on her. We cannot know how much of this speech is real, and how much is shaped by later writers. But the detail reveals something real about Rome's mind. Even in death, the Vestal's body had to be handled with care. That care did not save her. It only dressed the horror in pious language. Now picture the woman in the center of this. She stands in white robes before men who carry both religious and political power. She knows that if they choose to believe she is guilty, nothing she says will save her. She also knows that if she admits guilt, she confirms the story they want to tell about the state's moral strength. If she stays silent, they may take that as proof of defiance. If she speaks, they may twist her words. There is another layer. The man accused with her faces punishment too. He might be beaten to death or executed in another direct way. His fate is harsh, but it is also simple. His body is treated as that of a man who broke a rule. The Vestal's body is treated as something else, a symbol, a sign, a vessel that must be clean or destroyed. That difference is the hidden core of the horror. Ancient writers describe the punishment with a tone that feels cold. They tell us the Vestal was led through the city in a covered litter so the people could not see her face. They say she was dressed as if for burial. They say the pontifex spoke prayers. They mention that the chamber prepared for her contained a couch, a lamp, some food. They argue that this made the act less cruel. She was given comfort. She was not killed with a sword. The gods, not the state, would decide if she lived or died. It sounds gentle until you remember the simple fact. She was locked in a hole in the ground and the entrance was sealed. There are no details in our sources about what she thought in the last hours. No words from her mouth. No record of cries or prayers or silence. Rome wrote the ritual. It did not record the woman. The punishment had another effect before her final walk. It shaped how all Vestals lived day to day. Every woman in that house knew that a rumor could end this way. Every one of them was watched, and not only by men. They watched each other too, because one Vestal's supposed sin could endanger all. If the fire went out or a bad omen appeared after one woman acted strangely, suspicion could spread. Think of what that does to a mind. You are set apart as sacred. People step aside for you in the street. They lower their eyes. They say you hold Rome's safety in your hands. At the same time, the very body you live in is a risk. If it is touched, or if others say it was touched, your life may be taken beneath the earth. That is a form of psychological pressure that does not need whips or iron tools. The fear itself is a kind of trial. Daily life in the Atrium Vestae looked quiet from the outside. The house had a central courtyard with a garden and pool. Statues of former Vestals watched from stone niches. Their faces were calm. Their eyes were carved to look beyond the people who walked below. To a visitor, it might seem peaceful, a place of order and clean ritual. Inside the rooms, the picture was more tense. Young girls memorized lines while older women corrected them. A small mistake in a prayer might be harmless. or it might be taken as a sign of the goddess's displeasure. A dropped bowl, a misstep in a rite, a late visit to the fire, could all feel larger than they were. The older Vestals had to teach the younger ones how to move through a city that watched them like an omen, how to ride in a chariot and keep their eyes steady when men called out, how to witness a public execution without flinching, how to accept gifts from powerful men without letting those gifts become strings. Some of those gifts carried danger, land grants, gold, promises of support for the Vestal's family. As long as the priestess remained untainted, this was fine, but if a political storm hit, the same favors could be painted as signs of corruption. A handshake that once looked like honor could be retold as the start of a secret affair. That is how flexible purity trials could be. They did not only police sex, they policed closeness. They policed favor. They policed any tie that made a priestess look less like a symbol and more like a human being with links and debts. We also have to look at how these cases appear in the written record. The men who recorded Roman history were not interested in the inner lives of women. They were interested in Rome, its victories, its defeats, its omens. So when they mention a Vestal purity case, it is often in passing. They say that during a certain year there was war, plague, or political tension. Then they mention that a Vestal was found guilty of impurity and punished. Then they move on. Sometimes a writer hints that the charge may have been political. Maybe a powerful man wanted to weaken a rival's family. Maybe a priest wanted to show that he was strict enough to please the gods. The Vestal becomes a piece in a larger game. Her story is folded into the story of the state. One ancient writer, Plutarch, tells us of a case where a Vestal was tried, found guilty, and then later re-examined when new information appeared. It suggests that even in Rome, there were doubts, that some people felt uneasy about condemning a woman on thin evidence. But even these hints are small. The main pattern remains. The state needs to show that it punishes impurity. The Vestal's body becomes the stage. Imagine one case as a simple, clear path. A girl is chosen for the order at 7. She cries as she leads her parents, but over time she learns her duties. She tends the fire. She learns the prayers. She walks through the forum with a lictor, the attendant who clears a path for her. People point and whisper, but they treat her with respect. She begins to believe she is safe. Years pass. Rome fights wars. Leaders rise and fall. The girl becomes a woman. She sees the way men look at her. Some eyes carry worship. Some carry desire. Some carry resentment. She knows she is beyond marriage. She also knows that some men do not respect limits. One day, someone says he saw her in a quiet corner with a man. Perhaps they spoke too long. Perhaps their hands brushed. Perhaps nothing happened at all, and the story is pure invention. The pontiff hears the rumor. Questions begin. There is no moment, like in modern drama, where new witnesses appear with firm proof. There is only the slow turning of a wheel that has turned many times before. The woman feels the house grow colder. Other Vestals speak less. She is told she will be examined. The word tested might be used. Rome calls this a purity trial. In truth, the question is not, what really happened? It is, what story will we tell about this woman so that Rome looks strong? If Rome is shaken by defeat, if the gods seem angry, the answer is often harsh. The gods must be appeased. The people must see that their leaders will not tolerate sin in the heart of the state. The Vestal is condemned. If, on the other hand, Rome feels confident, the same kind of case might end in acquittal. Some Vestals were cleared. Some were honored even after accusations. This shows that the system was not automatic. It also shows that much depended on forces outside the woman's control. In one version of a case, a Vestal stands before the crowd, veiled, while the pontifex asks her if she will swear that she is innocent. She says yes. She swears by the gods she has served. For a moment, the whole city holds its breath. If they accept her word, they must also accept that the omens and defeats they fear have some other cause. If they reject it, they gain a scapegoat. Sometimes they accept, sometimes they do not. The phrase purity trial sounds clinical. It sounds like a process with clear rules. What it often meant in practice was that a woman became a screen for others to project fear, anger, and guilt onto. We tend to imagine torture as a room with tools, screams, and blood. In the case of the Vestals, the cruelty looked cleaner. It moved through ritual, silence, and words like duty and piety. Think about the steps the state took. First, it raised these girls up as symbols of perfect Roman womanhood. Then it bound them to a vow that no one could fully check from the outside. Then it gave itself the power to decide when they had failed, based on events in the wider world they did not control. Then it gave itself a way to kill them, while claiming it was not really killing them. All of this wrapped in prayers. When we read that a Vestal was handed over to the ancient penalty, that phrase covers a great deal of suffering. There is the fear before the accusation, the isolation during investigation, the pressure to confess or deny, the public shame of being led through the city, the knowledge that your name will be attached forever in the chronicles to a word like impure. And then there is the last walk. Ancient accounts describe the path out of the city to the place of burial as quiet. The Vestal was carried or led, veiled, so that people could not see her face. They saw only the shape of the woman who Rome said had betrayed the fire. The Pontifex Maximus spoke formal words. The crowd watched. We do not know what the woman thought. We can only imagine. She might have clung to the belief that the gods knew the truth, that if she was innocent, some sign would appear. She might have felt anger. She might have felt something beyond any simple word. None of that made it into the official record. It did not need to. The ritual was not for her. It was for Rome. The chamber under the earth had a bed, some food, a lamp. These details appear in the sources as if they soften the act. See, Rome says to itself, we did not simply throw her into a pit. We gave her what she needed. We left the rest to the gods. This is how a powerful state hides its violence. Not by omitting it, but by wrapping it in ceremony and calling it something else. The horror here lies not in graphic scenes, but in the calm way the system treated a human life as a tool to manage fear. The purity trial was not just about a woman's sex life. It was about whether Rome could stand to admit that some of its misfortunes came from bad decisions, greed, or chance, instead of sin in a woman's body. The fire in Vesta's temple burned on. The records moved to the next year, the next war, the next omen, the next convenient sin. If you want more hidden chapters like this one, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story.